Hi, and welcome to The Working Songwriter, the show where today's best songwriters come to talk shop. I'm your host, Joe Pug. Each episode here, we host a distinguished guest, and we ask them to go deep on their inspiration, on their process, on the general ups and downs of making a life in music. So, whether you're a grizzled veteran trying frantically to Google just what the hell Bandcamp Friday is, or else a scrappy upstart, hoping desperately that the payout from Bandcamp Friday will cover this month's rent, this is your show. Because ultimately, it is what every writer seeks most, an ironclad excuse to put off actually writing. Hey everybody, it's the second Friday of December 2020, and I thank you for joining us. This week's show is brought to you by Bandzoogle. Built by musicians and for musicians, Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform to build a beautiful website for your music. I'm old enough to remember when you had to pay somebody called a web developer to get a website made, and it would always be some guy named Lorenz who drove a Dodge Stratus with spinning rims and who was always trying to sell you VSOP that he portioned into 7-Up bottles. And old Lorenz would charge you about $1,000 for a website that would be obsolete in 6 months, but it's the future now, you guys. That's not how it works anymore. We're allowed to have nice things now. One of those nice things is Bandzoogle. Bandzoogle powers the websites of tens of thousands of musicians around the world, from weekend warriors to Grammy winners. Everything that you need is there: hosting and a custom domain name, dozens of fully customizable design templates. You can sell your merch there, commission free. You can have mailing list tools to send newsletters. You can have direct-to-fan sales. It's a wonderful product. Listeners of the Working Songwriter podcast can go to bandzoogle.com and try it for free for 30 days. Then use the promo code TWS, the initials of our show, to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. If you'd like to hear some of my music live in the coming months, every single Sunday night, I'm over on YouTube for Sunday Songs at 9 p.m. Eastern. That's Sunday night at 9 p.m. Eastern. It is a live stream. I'm live every Sunday night. I'm playing some of my tunes. I'm taking requests. I'm taking questions in the live chat for a Q&A. It's really become a fun, interactive experience. I think we're building something of a little community over there, including many people who listen to this podcast. So come on over, be a part of it. Head to YouTube, type in Joe Pug, subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you there on Sunday night at 9 p.m. Eastern. Finally, if you enjoy this podcast, if you'd like to help it remain a viable endeavor for me, here's a couple things that you could do to help. You could become a supporter of the show over at Patreon. Patreon is a platform that allows you to directly support creative endeavors that you love, that you find meaningful. You just head to their site, Patreon. You search for The Working Songwriter, or you search for my name, and then you sign up to kick in a few bucks every month for this show. Think of it as a voluntary subscription, a subscription that you don't have to pay, but that you choose to because you dig the show. If just 1% of our listenership were to kick in the price of a cup of coffee every month, it would make a profound difference. So thank you for everybody who's already done that. If you're not in a place to contribute financially, I get that. I've been there. You could still help us out by either leaving us a rating in the iTunes store, which is completely free, or secondly, just telling a friend about the show, spreading the word, which is also completely free. The simple math on those two things is that they will help me much more than they will be a pain in the ass for you. Okay, that's all the harassment for today. Thanks for joining us, and I hope you enjoy this chat. Our guest this week is a native of Alabama and Mississippi whose multi-decade career has navigated the hallways both of commercial country and taste-making Americana. After graduating college early, Allison Moorer joined her sister, Shelby Lynn, in Nashville, where her songs caught the ear of MCA Nashville president Tony Brown. Her debut album, Alabama Song, landed her on the Billboard country charts with a song of hers entitled A Soft Place to Fall. That very same song was featured in Robert Redford's film The Horse Whisperer and was subsequently nominated for an Academy Award for Best Original Song in 1999. She would go on to perform at that Oscar ceremony. She's also been nominated for an Academy of Country Music Award, an Americana Music Association Award, and a Grammy. Her songs have been recorded by Trisha Yearwood, Kenny Chesney, Miranda Lambert, Steve Earle, and Hayes Carl. She's recorded for MCA Nashville, Universal South, Sugar Hill, and Ryko Disc Records. Her recently released memoir, Blood, details the harrowing account of her abusive father, who tragically murdered her mother before killing himself when Allison was just a teenager. She would later record an album to accompany it of the same name, which was released in 2019. American Songwriter dubbed that album a, quote, masterpiece. The Guardian said of it, from tragedy, Moorer somehow finds compassion. And Rolling Stone has called her work stunning and revelatory. Allison is a friend of mine, and I was delighted that she took the time last week to jump on the phone with me and talk about her journey so far. Allison Moorer, thanks so much for being a part of the Working Songwriter podcast. Obviously, this podcast is about songwriting, but I thought it would be more fitting today to actually begin with your most recent work, which was a memoir entitled Blood. And I think that that's a good way to get into this conversation because the memoir covers your growing up, and you had a very unique and challenging situation growing up. Could you talk to our listeners a little bit about how you came up and what that memoir Blood is about?
Well, it's a memoir of my childhood. And like everybody, I've come to know that most everybody has a crazy childhood in whatever way that they do. Mine was traumatic in that my father was a very abusive and violent alcoholic, very complicated person. He was also very talented and had a lot of strengths and good qualities. But the drinking and personality problems or mental problems, whatever they were, took over, and he killed my mother and himself when I was 14. So a lot of the book covers, well, it's set in 3 parts, and the first 2 parts are set during that time. Part 3 is in present day. But it's really about my childhood, what it was like growing up with the parents that I had for my sister and me. I looked at it from a lot of different angles. It's not anything I've figured out. It's not anything I've really been able to make peace with other than on a day-to-day basis. But I needed to tell that story for whatever reason. When right after I had my son, John Henry, I was asked to be a guest on Maya Angelou's radio show. This was before podcast. This was in 2010. Mm-hmm. And I think podcasts, but they certainly weren't the overriding media that they are now. Mm-hmm. It was a radio show on Sirius. But anyway, I went to the studio and we were talking, and she asked me about my childhood, and she went on to say, okay, so now you have John Henry. What, when he is old enough to ask, are you going to tell him about this? Mm-hmm. And I do not know. I hope that I come up with something by the time he's able to ask me. But for whatever reason, it set me on this course that I needed to write it all down. So I began around that time writing this, that, and the other. I had never written prose before. And I really began this book in earnest in 2012. And, I rewrote it 4 or 5 times. I ended up going to graduate school and get MBA, which helped tremendously. It was just a long journey. And finally, I told the story that I felt compelled to tell.
You mentioned that your dad was a complicated man that had more things going on with him than just this final tragic act. It's almost surprising to me that you can even look at it with that nuance. As someone from the outside looking in, that you can still recognize that there were parts of him that, as you said, were talented or in some ways compelling.
Yeah, and I examine that in the book too. And I have gotten that feedback from some people. How could I see him as anything other than a monster? And, I wrestled with that when he was alive. Even as a young girl, I felt that conflict in myself of being afraid of him and in some ways hating him, the violent person that he was, but also knowing that he did teach me things. He did show concern and care at other times. He introduced us to music, and we were a musical family. And I don't think there's any way that I would have ended up with a career in music had it not been for him, because I grew up knowing what a songwriter was. We came to Nashville when I was 13 and made a record. So there were a lot of cool things there too. And it's something to wrestle with, but I think that's what we do as artists. We're always trying to solve the problem.
We're always trying to solve the problem or a problem?
The problem. Whatever the problem is, trying to solve it. For whatever reason in my artistic life, the problem I've been wrestling with for over 20 years is my family. Mm-hmm. And it's a theme that's shown up time and time again in my work. And I've made entire records about it. And I had to write a whole book about it and make an accompanying record to go with that book, because right. I've got so much to say about it, apparently, which is interesting to me. I think we all have our thing that we're wrestling with, our overarching theme, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Indeed, and as you said earlier on in this interview, even though you've written those several records, you've written a memoir, you've written a companion piece record to the memoir of the same name, and as you said earlier, you feel like you're not there. You don't have some overarching answer to any of this. It sounds like it's a continuing process.
Well, I'll tell you, once I made the record Blood and wrote that song that it ends with, Heal. I wrote this song called Heal with Mary Gauthier, and that's one of my favorite things I've ever done. Once I wrote that song, I felt like I was finally done. I felt like I had finally told it the best way I could tell it, and I was making my peace with it. And so what I do, I turned around and wrote a book about my son. So this family theme is obviously it's something that I'm pretty obsessed with, and not just my own. People's families are fascinating to me.
And so that's the book that you just finished. I emailed you about a month ago and said, "Hey, I might come through Nashville, and do you want to write a song together?" And you wrote back and said, "Thanks for thinking of me. I just finished writing a book, and I don't want to look at a piece of paper for another 6 months or something like that."
I think it's that I've gotten the pinky toe.
Yeah.
That Night Anything, which is, directly from Harlem Nights and Della Race. But anyway, don't you ever find yourself in that place where you just feel completely wrung out and you can't possibly imagine having anything to say
Nothing
at
to
that
say.
time?
Yep. Sadly, I find myself there more often than I do bursting with ideas, to be completely frank.
Yeah. Well, we go through periods. I think we do. I think for whatever reason, my 40s have been really fertile. I think that happens to women, though. I think we kind of come into our own at that age. We finally feel like we have authority and agency, and it comes through in that we're unafraid to say the truth.
That's interesting.
Or at least it's been.
It's really cool to have a career renaissance in your 40s. We're so trained to think of artists as like, oh, they do their best work in their early 20s and after that, it's all downhill. And, as someone who's way past his early 20s, I think about that a lot. And I think about how to stay inspired. It's inspiring to talk to you and hear you talk about your 40s like that creatively.
Well, I look back at myself when I was in my 20s. I mean, my first record came out when I was 26. So, at that time, you think you're doing your best, of course. But it's interesting how now that I'm here and I look at what was my best then, I think, it's pretty good. Pretty good for a 26-year-old for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But comparatively speaking, it's a drop in the bucket. And I think the rub is, sometimes we've used up our commercial chip,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that it's necessarily something you can keep forever, even in the best of circumstances. So now, I find myself sometimes thinking, oh, I would give up having done that for another shot, knowing what I know now and being who I am now. But that's absolutely undoable, of course. And that's the great lesson. And it's funny because I've been kind of chuckling to myself about this. And I don't mean for this whole conversation to be about aging and how wonderful it is, because it's certainly not, and none of us want to do it, right? But it's a theme lately of, it's interesting now to be 48 and to look at the 22-year-olds and know that I was one at one point and acted just like that.
Yep.
And I could not be told anything by a 48-year-old. And so now it's like this whole, it's the great joke.
It is.
It really is. The only thing you can do is have a sense of humor about it. And I think that's to learn.
It's amazing. I'm 36, and even when I talk to someone in their early 20s who's doing some creative pursuit, as soon as I start mentioning something that I might have an idea that you could use, you can see the eyes start to glass over almost immediately.
And that's so, and you're probably thinking, I'm 36. That's nothing. Why would you? And then you think, yeah, I probably did that.
Of course I did that. I did that often. Well, take me to that point in your life then. Take me to coming to Nashville, and you were very successful in the commercial end when you came into Nashville. Talk to me about how you ended up there and how things kind of took root for you at first.
Well, I moved here in 1993. I was still 20 years old. I had just graduated from college. How I graduated from college at 20, well,
yeah, I was about to say.
I was always, my mama put me into first grade when I was 5. So that means I graduated high school at 16, and that means that I graduated from college at 20. So
Yeah.
That's all. It was just always a year younger, and it was fine. It never hurt me at all. So anyway, I got here in 93, and my sister, Shelby Lynn, already lived here. So, of course, it's just the two of us. It's just the two of us girls in our family. And we grew up singing together. That's what we did. It was our language. I have tapes of us with me singing harmony at age 3. It's just, one of those kinds of families, a ridiculous blessing. And I look back now, talk about looking back, I didn't realize then that it was a special thing. And I look at it now and I think it's definitely a special thing to have been exposed to the music that I was exposed to and be a part of the family that I was a part of in terms of what I do now. Anyway, that's all to say, when I got here, I immediately started singing backup for her. Oh. And I did that all for a couple of years and started writing songs, met a couple of people. One thing led to another. And my first album ended up coming out on MCA Records in 1998. The year before that, I had a song in a movie called The Horse Whisperer, which was directed by Robert Redford. I ended up being in the movie, and then ultimately ended up getting nominated for an Oscar for writing that song with Will Owen, who now lives down the street from me. Actually, we lived in the same neighborhood at that time too. So it kind of went from there. I've made a lot of records. I've made now 10 records. I think I've been on 7 or 8 record labels. I've had 4 publishing deals, and now I don't have any of those things.
Talk to me though. That's a real whirlwind. What you just described there, a real whirlwind of activity. You're writing songs. You're also a recording artist. Things are getting picked up by movies. Things are moving on at a very fast clip. How are you able to deal with that? Were you able to deal with that successfully at that age?
Well, I thought I was, but I made a lot of mistakes. You know, I should have just had the word hubris tattooed to my forehead. Because really, I look back now and realize how little humility I had. And if I have any regrets about anything I ever did, it's that. I don't regret anything I ever did. I know everything happens because it does. And it's either supposed to happen that way or that's your choice and you have a lesson to learn. Whatever it is. I do not regret where I am at all. But shoot, I don't think I did, you know? Mm-hmm. No.
Like, what were some of those mistakes that you made early on? Like a specific thing where you think, yes, everything happens for a reason, but all things being equal, wish I hadn't done it that way.
I think for my body of work, I wish I had the best songs rather than my own songs.
Okay.
I'm proud to be a singer-songwriter, but at the end of the day, I know that I let the fact that I wanted to tell stories override the fact that I was making albums and ultimately commercial products. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't go back and err on the side of commerciality in any way, but I think I lacked the confidence to say, I'm not going to cut just my own songs. I'm going to cut the best songs and know that the songs of my own that I do cut will stand up against these other great ones.
Wow. That's really interesting because usually people would associate confidence with, I'm so confident that all the songs on this are going to be my own, but you're equating confidence there with, I'm so confident that I can cut another person's song, even though I'm a songwriter myself.
Yes. Well, that's true for me. I know it may not be for some people, and that may be twisted, but for me, it makes sense.
No, it makes total sense to me. I've just never heard it articulated like that, and I think that's a really cool way of looking at it.
Yeah. Well, again, I didn't have that then.
So when for you, if that was kind of version 1.0 of your career, when did version 2.0 start? Would that be after MCA Records, or was it kind of it wasn't such a cut and dry thing from that sort of commercial realm to the more, what are we calling this, that we're in the Americana realm, basically, or the more independent record label realm?
I think I had more like a phase 1.5. Phase 2. I think that I hit phase 1.5 when I got a divorce from my first husband. I was in a relationship that was just really controlling. You know, he did not nice things to me. Told me I was very dependent. I was a very insecure artist. When I tell you that I did not have the confidence to say, no, I'm going to cut the best songs, and songs, that's what I mean. I didn't have the confidence to make those decisions for myself because I was in a controlling relationship. We don't talk about that a lot when we talk about art. But I think it's a conversation that needs to be had. I've been thinking a lot about women in art lately, and Hayes and I were just in Houston. He did one of those socially distanced shows that they're doing, and we were there and had a night off, so we went to the Roscoe, which I love. Not the Roscoe, I'm sorry, the Menil. And the Roscoe's closed, I think, but we went to the Menil, and they have a little bookstore on the grounds, and I was looking through some of the art books, and I came across several that were about women being the support for all these male artists. Women who were artists themselves being overshadowed by the men that they were supporting and directing and helping and, sort of doing all the behind the scenes stuff. So I've been thinking about that a lot, and how, it's our nature to be accommodating. And when we are not, the consequences are dire. But I've been thinking about how my art is different now that I do not have, I'm finally in a relationship where my partner is not coming in telling me that I should do something differently. And it took a while to get there. So, that may be part of my obsession with the family, because I know the effects of my own father on who I am and how long it took me to sort of outgrow the tendency to recreate that in my own relationship. And it's come out in my art. I think it absolutely has. I think it does.
How did you find the confidence to get out of that, for lack of a better word, toxic relationship, and move on to the next phase of your career?
I found another toxic one to go to.
Oh,
that's what you.
Fair enough.
That's what you do until you learn how not to do it.
Well, then take me to the part where you learn how to not do it. You know what I mean? Like, when did you get to that point, and what do you think was the breakthrough that allowed you? It's so hard in life to not continue to repeat patterns, especially patterns that are bad for us.
Mm-hmm. And I think we really grapple with this when we're making art, when we're trying to figure out a way to get to empathy and get to having the story told. I think I stopped doing it when it started to hurt too bad for me to continue. And I think the only time we change is when we get sick of our own crap. So, you just have to get there. You have to be able to look at yourself and go, whoa, I have really messed some stuff up. And I have caused a lot of pain. I've been in a lot of pain. And why? Let's look at why. Let's go back. I'm a big fan of going back. Go back to the beginning and figure out where you went wrong, or go back to the beginning and figure out what happened and figure out where you are with it now. Just going through life like everybody does and going, ow, I don't want to do this way. This is not why I'm here.
I'm still in a phase. Go ahead. I was going to say, I'm still in a phase where I still like to walk directly into brick walls over and over again. So I'm not, that's why I'm kind of pressing you on this. I'm trying to figure out how to not continue to just walk into fucking brick walls all the time.
Well, so you're going to walk into the brick wall, but then because it hurts, you back up and go, oh, that's the wall. Let me find my way around it. Or let me, around it, that's probably the best way. But I'm not going to get around it unless I come right up on it and know that it's here.
Have you ever had this happen to you? You casually mention to a friend that you're thinking of getting into gardening, and then the next time you open up your internet browser, you're bombarded with advertisements for like Mr. T Chia Pets and Miracle Grow. That phenomenon can be explained by the 21st century internet maxim, if you don't know what the product is, you are the product. Why is Google search free? Why is Facebook free? It's not because Silicon Valley invested billions of dollars in technology for you to have a better online experience. It's because when you use their services, your browsing history and online data become the product for them to sell to other companies to advertise to you. Well, to hell with that. Your online data should be private and yours alone. What do you need? You need a virtual private network that protects your online data. NordVPN runs in the background while you go about your online business and keeps your data private. It doesn't log any of your activity, and it encrypts your data to provide online anonymity. Listeners to the Working Songwriter Podcast can go to nordvpn.com/TWS, the initials of our show. That is nordvpn.com/TWS, and get 68% off. That's less than $4 a month. Help out our show and protect your data at the same time with NordVPN. It sounds like Allison, with her recent memoir and album of the same name, was using her voice as a writer and a songwriter to move herself forward, and perhaps also to help her listeners move forward. Certainly most of us have never had to reckon with an incidence of sheer malevolence like she did, and thank God for that. But certainly all of us as human beings have certain memories, hang-ups, or fears that freeze us in place in certain ways. So we stay in the same place because we mistake that for safety. There's a wonderful poem by the Swedish poet Marlena Morling that speaks to the alluring safety of not moving from the place that you're in, and how that rigid and unmovable safety is not a place where human beings are meant to dwell for long. It's entitled Air. What if the air turns solid and locks us into place? And only those who are embracing at that moment will be embracing. And only those who are looking at each other then will be looking at each other. Those who just made a promise will never break it. The child counting out loud behind the trunk of a tree will never say 20 behind the trunk of a tree, and all the other children will be hiding, each in a momentary solitude. The man diving from a cliff into the ocean will be diving. Talk to me a little bit about, you did mention earlier that, so you started writing in earnest, you started writing the memoir in 2012, and then you said before you finished, did you mention that you finished grad school at that point?
I did. I decided, my son, John Henry, has level 3 autism, and he was very young. He was diagnosed before he was 2 years old. So when that happened, it really changed what I was able to do as far as sing or travel or any of those things, because he needed therapy. He ended up going to a school in New York City, so I was there for a very long time and sort of grounded and thought, well, I've got to do something to be able to support us, and I've got to have something to do with myself. I'm working on this book. I really love writing. I'm going to get an MFA. Then at least I could do something with that if I needed to. I would have that degree. So I did that. It was a big commitment, but it's one of the best things I ever did. I learned more about myself and more about art and writing than I would have otherwise, for sure. I don't think that you have to get an MFA to be a great writer in any way, but I am very grateful for the experience that I had doing that work myself.
Was it more a process of adding new tools to your kit, or more a process of undoing bad habits as a writer that you had before?
both.
Okay. So what were some of the things that you had to learn to take away?
The typical things, wordiness, um, floweriness, overwriting, underwriting, all of those bad habits that we all fall into. I mean, one of my favorite books is The Elements of Style.
Oh, yeah.
I'm a junkie, so I love Strunk and White. I had some great teachers. Susan Cheever was my very first workshop teacher, John Cheever's daughter. So she, and author of several great books. She was wonderful. I had some great teachers, and I learned a lot.
What were some of the things that you learned to add to your arsenal as a writer that you didn't have before?
People always ask me, as a songwriter, what did you take to writing prose? And I said, they're not similar in any way, except you can transfer some skills. I already had a developed ear, and I had a sense of rhythm. And those things are very important in writing prose, any kind of writing. You got to have rhythm, and you got to know what words to use by being able to listen. What else? I learned how important those things were. I was very glad that I had some sense of both of those things. And obviously, brevity, style, theme, structure, all those fascinating things.
Something I think a lot about as a songwriter, you just mentioned, like, hey, I already had this developed sense of melody and of rhythm. And I always think about that as a songwriter. I feel bad for prose and poetry writers that can't patch over big writing problems by just having a great melody or, like a repeating rhythmic thing. Like, I feel like in some ways it's so much easier to be a songwriter after you did a bunch of prose writing where you have to do all that heavy lifting just with the words. Did it make going back to writing songs easier because you had those other tools?
Only when it does, if you'll let me get away with that. It's as you know, it's all very mysterious. And there were times when I was writing, I don't write that many songs anymore. I really don't. I used to write all the time. I used to write songs. I've never been particularly prolific, but looking back, I go, wow, I used to put out a record every couple of years. I don't do that now, and I don't write that many songs now. But I write more prose. I really do. So as you know, I just finished my second memoir. Anyway, I forgot where I was going with that.
No, that's good. So you're saying that it wasn't as if you were running with a parachute behind you when you were having to do prose, and when it was back to the songwriting world where you could use melody and rhythm, that it was like the parachute was taken off. It was a little bit less linear than that.
There's just not a huge transference of skills for me, other than in my confidence that I do have it in me to use words pretty well. I think it's and this is not a case of I haven't done my time just with the craft of songwriting. I certainly, but I still know that there is a component of magic. You've got to catch the lightning. So I'm more confident now that I've got a good bottle to put it in. And so I'm not as frantic about writing songs as I used to be. I feel like if one wants to come to me and come through me, then it will, and I'll know what to do with it.
With prose and with songwriting, do you think it's possible to put yourself in a position for that lightning to strike you more, or or are you of the mind that it's just going to strike you when it strikes you, and just be ready there with the bottle?
No, it would. What is it? Opportunity would really like to find you working.
Yeah.
Who said that? Was it Michelangelo? Or I don't know. That quote has been around for quite some time, but yeah, we all get lucky, but those of us who put ourselves in positions to be lucky are much luckier.
Indeed. You mentioned earlier how important family has been for you, both the family that you came from and the family that you created yourself later, and chose. How do you conceive of family now as an adult and going through all the different phases and roles that you've been in? How do you conceive of that? Describe your description of a family to me.
That's a very good question. There's absolutely no doubt that those of us who are related by blood have a complicated relationship and one that is indelible. I know that those who I'm connected with in that way are people who do not come in and out of my life like other people do. So there is that. But there is also the family of people that you surround yourself with that are not related to you by blood, who are very important. Our friends, people who teach us, people who we do business with, and talk to about our passions or our crafts in ways that we can't talk to our families about. I see it all as, a circle.
You mentioned earlier how long it took you to get to that point of confidence, saying that, at a certain point it just hurt so much to not be there that you just had to get there. Once you got there, was it hard then to lean back and trust people you were close with again, with vulnerable parts of yourself?
I think that there's always that sense of, if I'm vulnerable, I'm going to be hurt. But I think the authenticity, to use an overused word, it's preferable to me now. I'd rather, anything else feels like too much work.
Yeah.
To try to hide my feelings or be someone who I'm not.
That is a shitload of work, being someone that you're not. I've done plenty of that work in my life.
Yeah.
What does a typical work day look like for you these days? You have, if you're not on the clock with John Henry, if you don't have, clerical things to do for your art or for your writing, it's just a creative day. What does a creative day look like to you?
A creative day. Well, I want to make my entire life creative. No matter what I'm doing, if I'm making a pot of soup or washing a dish, I want to do it in a way that is mine. And because I am a woman, and we tend to not be single-minded. We see life, I think, in a much more holistic manner than men do, and that's not any sort of put down or anything. It's just the way that it is, and we both have our place and our purpose. Mm-hmm. It depends. If I am actively in writing something or editing something or working on something, reworking something, revising, rewriting, whatever, I have to tell you, I get up before 6 a.m. And that's when I do my best thinking, when it's still dark outside. I am not a late night person. I go to bed early and get up early. So I like to stumble to my laptop by about 5:30, 5:45. And then I just work through until I can't go anymore. And then I'll get up and do whatever I'm doing, take a shower, get ready for the day. And I might look at whatever I've done again, like mid-morning.
Mm-hmm.
Or more typically, I'm probably dealing with something like putting something on social media or doing this or doing that, all the things that you have to do. And then, this is on a day that John Henry's in school, absolutely.
Sure.
Check in with my husband because he's likely doing the same stuff. Now, he doesn't get up at 5 a.m. and go work on his book.
I was about to say, yeah, and I'm sure Hayes is up at 5:15 doing, getting ready on his laptop as well.
Up early, and he gets up early now, and he does.
Really?
He gets to work. Does.
Awesome, man.
Even before me sometimes, because I've been trying to make myself sleep a little bit later because I'm not in that get up at 5 a.m. place.
Right.
And then I'll go back to it sometime in the afternoon, read through, likely print it out, read through it once, make my notes, set it aside. I don't look at it again until the next morning before 6 a.m. And then life fills up the rest of that. Now, if I'm working on music, that's totally different. Because again, there's so much. And I think there's magic involved in writing prose too, because sometimes, as I say, you catch the tail of the dragon and you ride it until you fall off. That's how I feel about songs, and that's just, just like it comes and then it goes in waves, I probably don't work on songs for as long at the time as I do on writing prose, but I tend to stick with a song until it's done, instead of putting it away and going back to it the next day or however long it takes,
Got it. So you don't like to leave something 50% of the way there. It's like if you got it started and there's something promising, you're just taking that bird in hand and just finishing it.
I would like to do that, yes. If I am in a place where I can do that, that's what I like to do.
You were mentioning earlier that you really like to take that creative spirit to other parts of your life. And I think one thing that you and I can connect on, the one thing that I really try to do with that, I love cooking. And I think that you can really take, there's so much that you can take from cooking back to songwriting. And there's so much in songwriting that I think you can take to cooking. I can kind of tell from your Instagram that you're pretty handy in the kitchen as well. How long have you cooked, and do you integrate that with your creative practices as well?
I don't remember not really knowing how to cook. I come from a family of great Southern cooks, and I think but funnily enough, I made my first cast iron skillet full of spaghetti sauce when I was, I want to say 10 or 11.
Oh, wow.
So I just kind of picked up that good Southern knowledge through, again, through just being around it. Because when you're a woman, you're hanging out in the kitchen with your older family members, when you're little. And I know, I've been around great cooks and wonderful dinner parties. You know how you do. You have these experiences where you go places and you're invited to dinners and all of a sudden, you know about things that you never thought you'd know about. And it just always, I don't know. I look at my life sometimes and go, wow, from where I came from to some of the places I've been, I never would have dreamed that I would have these opportunities. just to learn and soak up culture and learn about the world being so much larger than the places we come from.
Mm.
But I knew because of that, because of, I grew up watching my mama and my grandmama in the kitchen and then leaving Alabama and going other places and going to great restaurants and being around great cooks and going to dinner parties. You see that cooking and entertaining and creating an environment is a dance. And it's a beautiful one if you make it so. If you don't want it to feel tense, well, then don't be tense. And then, you figure out that your environment and your art and everything you do is a reflection of who you are. And, it's just an interesting thing to start to experience the world in that way, because it's not something that we teach.
Right. Very much so. I think I love cooking in the sense, I think one of the things that it taught me about songwriting is with cooking, there's a lot of ways to screw up a dish, but there's also a lot of ways to bring it back if it's screwed up. Like you're not just going to leave a dish you're not going to leave $40 worth of food and toss it in the trash can. So you got to find a way to bring it back. And I genuinely feel that way about songs now in a way that I didn't used to feel like, but I really do feel like whether it's the writing of the song or if you're to the point where you're mixing it and the mix doesn't sound right, like I always feel like I'm just adding, I'm one squeeze of lemon away from, or I'm one pinch of kosher salt away from unlocking the damn song,
Right. I love it. Yes. Perfect. Because it's true.
It's true.
There are recipes for things, and isn't it interesting how I was thinking about talking to you today, this morning.
Yeah.
And I thought, isn't it interesting how we do sort of come to learn these things and how important that is. Experience is so important when it comes to creating, and it seems like it can go a couple different ways. Either you grow jaded or you get excited because you've got this experience to rely on. And if you stay excited, then your songs or your work will just get better.
Yes. I could not agree more with anything. I think the growing jaded thing is, I just think that there's no excuse for it. I really don't. And I know that people have a lot of different circumstances in their lives. And I feel a little bit weird saying that because really my life in so many ways has been a bed of roses. And so I don't like to be judgmental towards other people. But, the growing jaded thing just seems like the most avoidable, unnecessary thing. And all you're doing is the person you're hurting is hurting yourself when you become jaded. And there's so many things that you can do to become inspired. I mean, look at what you've done. You've gone from basically commercial Nashville to graduate school for writing prose. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds funny.
Well, you were looking for ways to stay inspired, to keep that fire lit and not just be like, yeah, well, Nashville's a bunch of BS, that whole tired routine that we hear from people sometimes.
I know. I had never believed that. And it wasn't just because I lived here and was a part of the community, and I still am a part of the community. It's because it's not true. I think the best songwriters in the world and the best musicians in the world live in Nashville. And that makes for an interesting and special kind of community. And that's not any kind of snobbery or anything. It's just what a concentration.
Yes.
It's kind of amazing. So that narrative about Nashville is this, that, and the other, no, it's not. That's just one little facet.
Yep.
That commercial stuff, that stuff that none of us particularly appreciate, well, that's just one little part of it.
It is, and even if it's not stuff that you appreciate, it's still absolute snipers writing it and playing it as well. I mean, so.
In some cases, yeah. Yes.
Well, listen, I'm so glad we got to do this. Thanks so much for giving me about an hour of your time. I really appreciate it, Allison.
Oh, my pleasure. It's so great to talk to you.
That's our show for this week, and it was brought to you by Bandzoogle. Built by musicians and for musicians, Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform to build a beautiful website for your music. Use promo code TWS, the initials of our podcast, TWS, to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. Allison Moorer's latest album is entitled Blood, available everywhere music is sold or streamed. If before we meet again, you sit down to write, please remember, an expensive drug habit is not a song, a compelling Instagram account is not a song, and most importantly, reverb is not a song. So let all that take care of itself, and for you, just keep your eye on the song.